One of the most interesting and exciting experience in a person's life is when they fall in love. Have you ever seen two people fall in love, devoid of what is happening around the world, regardless of recessions, regardless of wars, regardless of rumors of wars, regardless of storms? Two people in love believe they can conquer all and overcome it all. And for those young ladies who are listening right now, don't be tricked. Don't fall for some young man who would come to you and confess his love to you the way he would try any other young lady that he meets. When a young man comes to you and he tells you that when I think about you, my hands get weak. When I think about you, my knees begin to shake. When I think about you, I get out of breath. When I think about you, I get all weak and limp and I cannot stand anymore. This does not mean that he might be in love with you. It might mean, though, that he's having an asthma attack. Young people, old people, when we fall in love, it's an amazing experience. It's an amazing experience to be wooed. It's an amazing, exciting experience to give your love, your heart, and your life to somebody else. In the world of the black widow spider, the male is considered the wimp of all the species. He is 4 times smaller than the female, and in terms of color, while the black widow spider is, of course, black, the male, in turn, is white and gold. Now, what kind of a color is that for a man? When a male comes to court his black beauty, when the male makes his way towards this black widow, when the male tries to come and woo the black widow, he does so very carefully, watching his every move. He makes sure that every twitch of his body has been carefully orchestrated, because the black widow is a blind spider. And even though she is blind, she is a very sensitive huntress who knows every inch of a web that she has woven together. And regardless of what creature it might be, when it enters her web, the mere vibrations through the body of the creatures and the vibration created on the web sensitizes and tells the black widow whether it is a friend or a foe. So the black widow is very sensitive to her very own web. But when the male approaches, he does not rush to the female, the black widow. No, he simply goes onto the web, at the edge of the web, and he begins to pluck the few strings of that web. As a romantic poet would strum his guitar, the male begins to pluck this web that he finds himself in. And while he is there, he plays a rhythm that soothes the black widow and calms her down, making her more receptive for him to approach her. If the male approaches haphazardly, if he approaches in a very fast and unplanned manner, the black widow, who cannot see because she's blind, because she cannot see, might interpret that which is on her web differently and might seek to respond differently. But the male is so smart, so clever, that he begins to pluck on his guitar as he approaches his black widow for mating. The constant rhythm that is created calms the black widow as she awaits her mate, as she awaits her lover's approach. Every few steps that the male takes, he plucks again, so that he can calm her even more. And as he moves, the black widow gets agitated, but he pauses and begins to pluck again. This kind of rhythm that he creates calms the black widow down so much that she begins to accept him as a friend and not a foe. The black widow can easily confuse the male to be any other insect by the way it moves on that web. And so the male is very, very careful how it approaches its mate. Finally, when the male approaches the black widow, he strokes her gently. Talk about romance. He strokes her gently, he caresses her, and then he makes her feel so limp, so weak, so calm and relaxed, so that he can make his next move. Very, very delicately, the male approaches the black widow, embraces her, and begins to stroke her, and mating begins. After mating, the male spider is exhausted. And in this weakened condition, the male spider forgets the way it has entered, forgets the approach that it took when it came in the beginning. After mating, it is so exhausted that it cannot really control himself intentionally and deliberately. And so it begins to stumble about the web, trying to leave. These irregular vibrations on the web trigger the huntress instinct within the black widow, and because she cannot see, she merely interprets that motions. She interprets that irregular motions to be the presence of an enemy in her web, and she makes herself to the male spider and devours him completely, eats him up. That's how the black widow gets her name. She is always a widow because she eats her husbands up. Unfortunately, the black widow's pattern is so clearly seen in relationships today. Husbands and wives, young lovers find themselves in similar situations. There are many ways which men and women dominate each other and devour each other. There are many, many ways that a powerful, good, and wonderful marriage can reach a slow death. There are many ways that husbands dominate their wives, and husbands dominate their wives, and wives dominate their husbands. There are numerous ways. And it's time that we learn from the black widow spider some valuable lessons as to how we should treat our spouses, our families, and those who are very, very close to us. Romance and intimacy are among the first things to go in a wonderful relationship. And the illustration of the black widow and the way the black widow devours her mate, the male spider, introduces us to a whole new concept that God wants us to see in His Word. And I believe that God has put this illustration in nature, not just so that we can marvel at it and find humor in it, but so that we can learn some very valuable lessons. When we get back, we'll discover what the Bible has got to say about spiders.